he was walking into the headquarters, he looked around and talked to his escort, and he said, yeah, I'm surprised there's so many general officers at this headquarters. And his escort looked around and he said, well, gee, the commanding general's an officer, his deputy is, the operations and wing commanders are, but, there's maybe a half a dozen. Why do you make that comment? And he said, well, look at all the cars in the parking lot. And they said, oh, those don't belong to just the generals. I said, well, who do they belong to? So they belong to the airmen and women that work here in the headquarters. And Akrameyev is puzzled. And he says, well, what do they do with them? He says, well, they take them home, go home at the end of the evening because there isn't sufficient housing on base. And then Akrameyev looked back one more time and he said, how do you get them back the next day? It was a true story, but it shows how you can come from different perspectives, different experiences, both of these very accomplished individuals, and we look to get all of those opinions and input in there. And to help us do that is our partner, and they truly have been a partner even since we met, responsive to every request, just this morning. It's Market Street Services, and it's headed up by Mac Holliday. And Mac is probably the only person I know of that has served at the state economic development level in 3 different states. He started his own outfit here a number of years ago and has served clients throughout Georgia, throughout the Southeast, throughout the United States. And he'll tell you a little bit more about Market Street in his presentation. We also have got a list of a number of accomplishments that Mac has achieved, but you're always known by what have you done for me lately? And what he's doing for us lately is right here in Fayette County, and I think you'll be as impressed and satisfied with our partner Market Street as we've been. So Mac?
Bob, thank you very much. We are delighted to be here again. Delighted to have a chance to meet with you. As he indicated, I have spent my adult life in this work. I was a U.S. Naval aviator for 5 years and came back from the Far East to my hometown of Memphis and started work at the Memphis Chamber in 1972. And I subsequently went to Columbus, Indiana and Charleston, South Carolina to run those chambers. And then was the state director for South Carolina, Mississippi, and came here to Georgia to run the Governor's Development Council now 20 years ago. When my mother was still alive, she used to say, I am not sure what the boy does, but I think he's a migrant worker. So, in fact, that's what I've done. I started this company in 1997. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. I do want to tell you that we'll talk about some of our principles in a minute, but in terms of the firm, but I do want to tell you that we very much believe in realistic, actionable, specific strategies that are benchmarked and measured very clearly. So this is not going to be a voyage into Wonderland. This is going to be a voyage into the future that we hope you all will create for your place. Let me tell you a bit about what I'm going to cover this morning with some help from our staff. I'm going to introduce some of them in just a minute. We do need to start with the context of where are we in terms of the realities of this economy and what's happened to us. It has been termed the Great Recession by David Wessel at the Wall Street Journal. It is a term which I think you'll see, or most of you already know, is quite appropriate. One of the things we have at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution is an interesting cartoonist named Mike Lukovic. This is one of his most interesting cartoons. The car is off the cliff, headed to the bottom. The inhabitants are asking, are we there yet? The sad news of this cartoon is that it ran on November the 4th of 2008. And here we are, 5 years later, and I can attest to you, having been in 6 states in the last 2 weeks, that many states are still asking the question of, are we there yet? The reality is that there's been nothing like this in my lifetime. I'm going to hopefully show you that in just a second. As I mentioned, I was born and raised in Memphis, so anytime I read something about the king, for those of you not old enough to know, that's Elvis, then I have to pay strict attention to it. Thomas Friedman may not be the best economic writer in the world or in the country, but he sure is the best traveled. Friedman wrote a column called Elvis Has Left the Mountain. It was published on February 1st of 2009. When you may recall, many of the best paid, I'm not sure why, but best paid economists in the country were saying, oh, we're almost out of this. It'll be over soon. We'll be back to normal. The key word in this whole paragraph is this one right here. What Friedman had figured out was that the structure of the economy had fundamentally begun to change, and that we were not going to go back to where we were, and no matter what we did in the short term, we were not going to be able to fix it. So, in fact, as I said, it has been called the Great Recession. What actually happened and why do people call it that, and what is different about it? This chart probably shows it better than just about any we could come up with. You can see the last 6 recessions going back to the 70s, and what you see in the chart is that, in fact, this is how long it took to get back to the employment you had when the recession started. Here we are, 6 years later, not even close. The projections are it will be 2015 or maybe even later when we get back to the same employment we enjoyed in 2007. In fact, it really didn't even start then when the recession started. It has been a decade of disruption, as many have called it. In fact, many people called it the decade from hell. This is one of my favorite covers of Time magazine from November 24th, 2009. The cover story was written by Andy Swerver. It was followed by a series of articles, The Great Leap Backward by Michael Toth, The Decade of Disruptions by Walter Isaacson, The Lost Decade by Paul Krugman. Why did they say that? And what was it all about? We can remember some things for sure, not only the Y2K question, the presidential recount, which seemed to take forever in 2000, 9/11, Afghanistan, Iraq, tsunamis, Katrina, Rita, the financial meltdown, Bernie Madoff, foreclosure, all kinds of different things. And so what statistically did that look like? Here's what we see in the last 30 years. The population growth has been 21 million, 32 million, and 27 million, and the job growth has been 18 million, 22 million, and a minus 1.5 over an entire decade. In fact, this is the first decade in our history that we had a net loss of jobs. So where does that leave us? What is happening to us now as we continue to move through this? First of all, one of the things that's very different, as you can see, and the blue lines are, in fact, the last recessions that I mentioned, the last 6 or 7 of them. And what you see is the loss of net worth of households following the recession. And you can see the great difference in this one, and that is that the average American household has lost 20% of their wealth, mostly through the loss of the value of our homes and our 401ks becoming 101ks or whatever in the hell is left. So the fact is that we are slowly beginning to come back, but we are a long way from where we were when this all started. One of the other realities is this. In this state of Georgia, 1,950,000 people, or 20% of our population, are receiving food stamps. The vast majority of these people have never gotten public assistance before. Many of them have jobs, but they're not paying enough to get them above the poverty level. Understand what that is. A family of 4 must make less than $24,000 a year to be eligible. So what we see is a restructuring that has left us, and Georgia was hit very hard by this recession. We lost over 350,000 jobs in the midst of it. We've recovered less than half of those, and the jobs we've replaced are not nearly as good as the ones that we lost. So it's a tough time out there. It's changing the demographics and the realities of counties all over the state, including this one. You can see us looking at the enrollment over time, and I don't know if you can see the color on these as well as you should. There have been great blips. Georgia is that red line. The United States is, in fact, the gray one, and all the other states are in there, a bit hard to see. However, the fact is that as our unemployment rate has remained above the U.S. average during this whole recession, we still are in the top 10 in terms of that, and the difficulties remain in terms of the realities of the tough times that many of our people are having. One of the things that we look at all the time, every month, is the Consumer Confidence Index. It tells us what people are thinking about, remembering that the consumer represents 70% of the economy. And what we see in both the present situation and their expectations for the future is this giant up and down, as you can see. It was at the beginning of the decade way up to 130. It went all the way down to 25 in February of 2009. We've worked our way up and down back to about 70 here in the release just for the November numbers that just came out. It's not going in the right direction fast enough or well enough in terms of all those pieces of the puzzle. Here are the job losses from the beginning of the Great Recession, looking back to the beginning in 2008 when we were losing 600,000 to 800,000 jobs a month. We are slowly working our way back, having increased about 200,000, 203 in November. The unemployment rate is now at 7% nationally. And at the same time, we continue to reduce federal and state employment across the board. Let me tell you a little bit about the company, about what we do for those of you who were not here when we were here previously, just to explain a bit about what we do and where we are. As I mentioned, founded the firm in 1997. It is really a fine staff of professional people that I have the opportunity to work with. We really are very much dedicated to community and economic development. It is all we do. We do not do anything else in terms of executive search or site selection or fundraising or anything else. It's very much about working to improve the lives of people in the communities that we work in. We are different from some others in that we speak and write in English, not in code. And this second bullet got me in a great deal of trouble as I worked for 4 different governors. We tell the truth. The good, the bad, and the indifferent. We can't be of any assistance to you if we don't tell you what really is and what's out there. We feel very strongly that our relationship, as has been indicated, is a partnership. It's important to be sure that we're working together and talking with you. We are delighted that well over half our business each year is from clients that we've already worked with before. We produce very specific deliverables, which are about your situation, not someone else's. I have learned over these years that every place really is different, so it requires different things. We've been fortunate to work all over the country in 33 different states, in well over 150 communities at the state level, from small cities like Watertown to large communities like Austin, Nashville, and others. We currently have a very interesting array of clients from Des Moines, Iowa to Rochester, Minnesota, where they are looking at the $3.5 billion expansion of the Mayo Clinic to difficult communities that are still having a tough time in terms of recovery. It's interesting, too, that 4 or 5 of these are repeat clients for us, and it's fascinating, again, to work with them again. Here are the people that are going to be working on this project. I'm going to introduce the ones that are with me today and ask Jonathan to come and help explain the process in just a second. Jonathan Miller is right here. He's going to stand up. He's a little bit vertically challenged, but he was standing up. He's a graduate of Vanderbilt and Georgia State. He has worked on processes with us in Madison, Wisconsin, in Austin, in Gwinnett County, in Louisville. He's been with us for nearly 3 years now. Renata Robinson is from Jackson, Mississippi. She is a graduate of Tougaloo, and she has 2 master's degrees from Georgia State. She's our lead researcher. She's led projects in Cobb and Des Moines across the whole country. She's been with us for 5 years. Matt Tarleton is the senior the Senior Manager of Research and Projects. He has 2 degrees in economics and finance from UNC Greensboro. We do have to work with him on his language and understanding that we don't like economists. Anyway, he's been at Market Street for 5 years. He's managed processes in Raleigh and Watertown. In Cobb County, he was the lead person on our metro strategy that we did for ARC last year. You'll also get to meet Alex Pearlstein, who is from LA. I have to explain to some folks that's not Lower Alabama, that's Los Angeles. He went to UC San Diego. He has a graduate degree in city and regional planning from Georgia Tech. He is a principal with us, as is Matt, and has been with us for 10 years, has led all 3 strategies for Austin, Nashville, Des Moines, and other places around the country, and Kathy Young, who holds it all together, also a principal in the firm, a graduate of Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech. She's led workforce and development strategies in Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, worked on many other projects, and is our director of operations for the company itself. Here are the other members of the team who will be in backup positions and helping out, but not specifically assigned to this particular project. Let me talk a minute about community and economic development and what we mean by it. What we mean is that it is a deliberate and consistent approach to strengthening a place. This is all about place, and it's very much measured by things that we can measure: per capita income, poverty rates, educational attainment, all of those pieces of the puzzle. It is a process to get there in terms of quality, economic, and community development. Having been someone who's been to more ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings than any human should have to suffer through, let me tell you that they're not very important. They are minor events in a much more complicated process. It is very much about where the free enterprise system, your local economy, the possibilities of what's happening regionally, nationally, globally, intersect with what you're doing, with what kind of place this is, what the possibilities are. And it requires that we keep our eye on the ball related to economic diversity. If the Great Recession taught us nothing, it is that we cannot be complacent, that we cannot believe that 1 or 2 sectors being strong will carry us through. Because as we have seen, every sector in the United States lost jobs during the Great Recession except healthcare. So the fact of the matter is we have to keep that at the top of our list. I have the great pleasure of teaching the basic economic development course at 7 different universities. When I talk to people getting into the field or those having a 2nd or 3rd career, I talk about it being hard work, ever changing, and about challenging the status quo. And some people say, well, why do you say that? And the simple answer is this: if things do not change, how do they get better? You don't want it to be what it was for you as a child. You want your children and grandchildren to have greater opportunities. One of the other things about community and economic development is the reality that there are many players and many partners, that we have to think across boundaries and knock down the silos that have kept us from working together. Above all, it is a team sport. It is what it's going to take to move this county forward together. We know, too, that the issues are changing, that they're different. This is a slide from a place where we were, where they voted that these were the words that came up again and again in terms of what's there. They're all different for different places, but simply to note that they're complicated, that there are many, that is not a single focus, that there are many different things out there to consider. Think, too, about the holistic creation of a community strategy is about a lot of different things. It's about all kinds of pieces of the puzzle putting together. And then how you put them together is what it's really all about. It is happening everywhere. Community and economic development is really across the board. It is the life's work of what every person in this county is working on every day. It's very much about where that goes and what might be there. The question, too, is why do we do this? Well, you're here because you care about this place. You want it to be better. You care about the people that live here. You care about the folks that come and visit. You want it to see continuing and positive change. As you look ahead, you're willing to challenge that status quo. And there's one more thing. that you care about. This is my grandson. His name is Finn. His brother's name is Aiden. His sister's name is Molly. If you haven't figured it out, his father is Irish. His name is Aiden Majorum. I'm going to tell you a bit about my extended family just to make a point. My two grandfathers, one was a 6-foot 5-inch country lawyer from Dresden, Tennessee, named Landon Erie Holiday. They called him Lake Erie for short. The other was a circuit-riding Methodist preacher named E.F. McDaniel. That's who I'm named after. I think often about what they might think about my extended family, given their basically rural and background in a different time, in a different place. You see, Sarah, my stepdaughter, my wife's daughter, who's married to Eric Majorum, who is the father of this child, is one of our family. And my wife has a son named Alec who lives down in Charleston, and I have two daughters. One of them is named Sarah. She is married to Narendra Ghosh. His parents were both born in India. They are nuclear physicists. We have short conversations. My daughter Sarah is pregnant. She's going to have a child named Ravi in February. My other daughter's name is Jennifer. She is gay. Her partner is African American. My granddaughter on that side is named Zoe. She is African American as well. I tell you all this simply to tell you that they are not only the future of me and my family, they are the future of this country. They are the workforce that you're striving to attract. They're well educated. I know, I paid for it. The fact is, when we get all 13 of them together, we have our own UN meeting. And it's a great deal of fun because they love each other and they care about each other. I'm going to ask Jonathan to come now and take you through the basics of what is this initiative about and what are the pieces of the puzzle and how important you are to making it a success. Jonathan?
As Max said, I'm going to kind of give you an overview of the process, where we're going, where we hope to be when we are done with this. So we've built the process around these central questions that were posed to us in the RFP and RFQ process. And so really speaking to where are we now, where are we going, and how do we get there. And so our approach has been to incorporate these into the actual process for the Fayette Visioning Initiative. On the left side, we have this process being led by a diverse steering committee, but also by the community itself. And you'll see they're on equal footing. We need input from both bodies, and so this community leadership meeting is so very important to the process because we want to hear what you have to say, your thoughts about where Fayette County is going. And this is not the only opportunity to voice your opinions or to engage with us. There's going to be a bunch of other ways for you to share your opinions. And so the process is in 3 phases. The first phase is the competitive assessment phase, where we really incorporate all the stakeholder input that we'll be gathering. We marry that with a bunch of data and quantitative findings to really understand where is Fayette County right now. If we don't have a common understanding of where Fayette County is, we can't really say anything else. We have to have that common basic understanding of how competitive Fayette County is in order to make sure that we can plan for the next 5 years. The second piece of this is the vision plan. This is what are we going to do over the next 5 years. This is where we talk about the actions and the items that people are going to actually engage in to really make Fayette County the best place that it can possibly be. And finally, the implementation guidelines. This is where the what becomes the how. This is where we talk about what should occur first, what are the priorities, how much is it going to cost, who's doing what when. And so these are a very detailed, timeline-based document really showing how the vision plan can become a reality. Before we dive in even further to those pieces of it, I wanted to take a moment to talk about community involvement, because this is a vision plan and we need as much input as we can. In order for this plan to be actionable and for people to have buy-in and enthusiasm about it, it has to reflect what people think about Fayette County. So today we're kicking off 2 intensive days of interviews and focus groups. We have 17 interviews scheduled, and we have 10 focus groups over the next couple of days. We're meeting with groups such as students. We're meeting with a group of high school students, small business, large employers. We're going to meet with some millennials and young professionals to understand what they think about Fayette County and whether or not they see themselves living in Fayette County in the next 5, 10 years. So we hope that we're going to get a great cross-section of Fayette County through these focus groups and interviews. This community leadership meeting is another great avenue for us to gather feedback and to present to you this process. We want to make sure that this process is as transparent as possible, that we are sharing our findings with the community. The next community leadership meeting is March 4th, so please be looking to have that date on your calendar. Time and date are to be determined, but it certainly is going to be on March 4th. We're also going to be using an online web platform called MindMixer. It's going to go live in late January, and it's going to be a structured way for us to pose questions to you about the research, about the findings, and really get feedback on those different items. The online survey is up and running. If you haven't taken it yet, the URL is surveymonkey.com/s/Fayette Visioning. It's going to be open through December, but this is going to be a great way for us to get input. We've had 88 people take it so far, but we hope that is just the tip of the iceberg. We need thousands of Fayette County residents and people who do business here to take that survey. There's logic built into the survey so that people are answering questions that pertain to themselves, and we can cross-reference different demographic pieces with different answers, so we can really get an understanding of what young people think as compared to what senior citizens think, or people who live in Woolsey as compared to living in Tyrone. And so we really want to understand the different things that are going on here in Fayette County. We have a project website. It is up and running. It is fayettevision.org. This is a clearinghouse of information for the process. When documents are finalized, they'll be posted to this website. But if you have questions about how to be involved, who to contact, and want to just know more about the process, this is a great place to go, and we encourage you to visit and tell your friends and family about this website. We've at the previous meeting, at the October 18th meeting, the audience was asked, what are the most critical considerations that we have to take into account going forward? And so we took the answers, and this is a word cloud, and the size of the words dictate how many times they were said. So based on the text polls that came in on October 18th, these are the words that were the most critical considerations for this process. And so you can see that education was by far and away the most important topic or most critical consideration. And so this is the kind of input that's going to be valuable to us, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg. But you see things like development and infrastructure and transportation, diversity, workforce, quality of life. And so these are the things that we're going to be dealing with, and these are the things that we really need to get feedback on. And we've been doing some homework as well. Market Street came down and toured Fayette County on November 15th. Matt and Virginia took us around. We saw a ton of different sites. And to prove that I'm not lying, this was our route. That's 140 miles of Fayette County, a little bit of Coweta. And so we felt like we saw a great cross-section of the county. Got some great conversations about what kinds of things are going on, and really got to have a sense for what the county feels like. And so for us, that is so important. So as I mentioned, the first phase is the competitive assessment, and it's going to marry what we hear from you with the data. It's going to, we're going to try and put as much quantitative oomph behind this deliverable as possible, but we have to marry that with what people say to really understand the storylines that are here in Fayette County, and understand the competitive issues that the county is facing. We're going to benchmark you against 3 other competitive counties. You can see them here: Hanover County, Virginia, outside of Richmond; Williamson County, Tennessee, outside of Nashville; Forsyth County here in the metro. We're also going to compare you to the metro itself to understand how the dynamics here either diverge or correlate with what's going on in the metro itself. And then we're also going to look at the United States as a benchmark, because that's just a good way to understand how communities in general are doing. And so these counties, they're not inherently doing anything great or poor. They're going to be just a way to put the data into context. And so we want you to be sure that these are communities that you're competing against for jobs, for talent, for capital investment. And so we want to know how you stack up. And so it's going to be a very, very important piece of the competitive assessment. The second piece of this is the Fayette vision. This is the vision plan, like I said before. This is the what. This is really where we talk about what's going to happen over the next 5 years. It's going to really rely on the research that we have to date. It's going to rely on the steering committee leadership. It's going to rely on the stakeholder input that we've received. And so we expect things to bubble up from all of these different sources to really understand what's going to make sense for Fayette County over the next 5 years. And it's going to include best practices. So we're not going to say you should do something and not have any kind of example or best practice for you to look to. And the third piece of this is the implementation guidelines. This is the playbook for the community over the next 5 years. This is where the rubber really meets the road in terms of who's doing what kinds of partnerships are being formed, how much it's going to cost, when's it going to happen. And we're going to include benchmarks. How do you know this is being successful? And so we're really going to give you numbers and hard things to look at to say, we are meeting these goals. But then also there's going to be program and activity benchmarks to say, did we start this program? Have we had success doing this? And so it's going to be a mixture of those two to really gauge success. And so I wanted to share with you these project milestones. The online survey is going to be open through December 31st. Focus groups and interviews are occurring this week, so we are on the ground and running for sure. Mind Mixer will go live in late January, and so I expect that you all will have an email, or we're going to post it on the website when that will go live. The next community leadership meeting is on March 4th. We're going to go back to Mind Mixer again in early May with some new rounds of questions, and we're going to wrap up on June 10th. And then that is really when the hard work begins. That's when our job is essentially done, and that's when people begin to implement what we've been talking about for the past 6 months. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mac, and we're going to do some text polls to get some more feedback from you. So get those phones out and get ready.
The reality is that when we do a strategy process like this, it is very much about consensus. We know there can't be unanimity on everything, but we work very hard to be sure that we've gotten the feeling and the realities of what really is important to people, what they care about, marrying that, as Jonathan said, with what the data says and what the possibilities are. It is serious work. It takes time. Obviously, you can see the schedule does run for the next 6 months or so in terms of all those pieces. It's interesting, too, that we see many different places respond in different ways. I am very hopeful that we're going to get thousands and thousands of responses to the survey. Interestingly, we had a very small community in South Dakota ask us to come and help them. It's called Watertown. And Matt, it has 12,000 people total? 22,000 people total in the whole place. And I got to tell you, around there's no one. I'm sure as hell glad I'm not there today, because it's about 15 below zero and it's snowing like crazy. We went there and did a strategy with them, and when we got to the point of the survey, and we said, do y'all really want to do this survey? I mean, you're small and so forth. Long story short, they said, absolutely, we got to have it. We want it. So we did it. To our amazement, 2,300 people responded. 11% of the population took place. took part were very clear on what they wanted, where they wanted the community to go. When we helped them plan the rollout meeting, 750 people came. 350 of them volunteered that day to work for the future of their small town. So in fact, the process can lead to things that you don't expect in terms of involvement and so forth. Some of you were here 20 years ago when there was a process, Fayette 93, which was started several years before. The one thing I know for sure about this process and project is we were all younger then. You were younger. This county was very different demographically in 1993 than it is today. As some of our steering committee members said, you've matured a great deal. It's interesting, some of the quotes that came from that work, and here's some of the priorities that came as they were trying to look forward 10 years to think about what the key issues were facing Fayette, about communication and cooperation and water systems and higher standards and attainment and education, and balanced and orderly growth, and better roads and sewers, and health care and culture and recreation and volunteerism and so forth. So I guess what I would say is that, interestingly, some things change and some things don't. We had a lot of comments this morning from the steering committee about their view of these things and are they the right ones, wrong ones, or whatever. And we're going to ask you some of those questions that we asked them in terms of looking at things. Now, this is something that we've never done in terms of on site at a project. But Jonathan promises me this will work. So here's the first question. Which is the most important of these needs as you think about this vision plan? What you're supposed to do is to text a keyword to that number, one of these words, and we'll see what you think. Now, I have no idea how long we're supposed to wait or any of that.
It'll just take a couple seconds. So in the two, where their sender is, you'll want to type in 22333, and then either type built, schools, jobs, recreation, cooperation, or food.
That's kind of spooky, isn't it? Somebody's watching, right? Okay, so
Even if he does change the slide and you're still texting in, we'll still be able to gather your data. So if you're having some trouble, you can still continue to do it, and as we move on, we'll still have it in.
interestingly, jobs and schools right up there, cooperation and engagement right up there. Okay, here's the second question for you. It is, if there is a phrase which you would like to use to describe what the county would look like or be known for in 10 years, which one of these words would it be? It's the same kind of process, the key word, and then typing in which word do you like the best. Somebody voted for cultural. Somebody voted for safe. There we go. There we go.
I'm afraid Mac's gonna fall in love with this, and now we're gonna have to.
Thank you, it's working.
It's really fascinating. I would be disappointed if there weren't a lot of answers to this one, for sure. Okay. Okay. The third question is for you a question of, do you feel attached to this place? Loosely, not at all, or very are the choices in terms of how you feel about Fayette County now, today. If you'd like to speak for your children, you can put that in too.
Check the keyword. Make sure you're typing in, watch your autocorrect. Remember, you're still 22333 is who you're texting to, and watch your autocorrect, because that way it's saying that you're not typing directly.
No space.
So if you're typing very attached, one word. Well, you have to backspace a little bit, and it will help you kind of change your autocorrect. Just like if you were to change the word. Right?
Fascinating.
If you are having trouble, if you actually type in the word and click where you're actually typing, it won't change it before you hit the.
Okay, we have two more questions for you, which are going to require you to make a choice on your own. This one is, what is the greatest opportunity in the future for the county? Again, it can be jobs, it can be young people, it can be schools, it can be whatever you think it is, whatever the greatest opportunity might be. Again, a word that you think is most reflective of what are the opportunities for the future for the county that we need to be clear and think about.
And to this one, you would type in.
Let me have
still
my
the same
Diet Coke.
number, write
Let me have my
Fayette,
Diet Coke.
Space, and then whatever you would like to say. So you have all tab. Fayette, I don't think it matters. Fayette, space, and then whatever you would like to say is the most important. What's the greatest opportunity? If you have a signature on your text.
Not so anonymous anymore.
I know what Skip said. I'm smart enough to figure that out. Hmm. Fascinating. Okay, here's the last one, which is, what is the county's greatest single, you only get one, single greatest asset? What is it?
Instead of typing
Terrific. First of all, let me thank you for doing that and for participating, and I will tell you that we will review and digest and dissect all of that input in terms of the pieces of the puzzle. I would like to ask if there's any general comments or questions that you have for us at this point. We can take a minute or two and be glad to answer those if anybody has a question or a comment they'd like to make this morning. Remember, there are no stupid questions, only inappropriate answers. So anything you'd like to ask. Yes, sir.
For those of us who are electronically challenged,
Yes, sir.
or without a phone, how do we participate in what we just saw?
The question was, how do you participate if you didn't have a phone and so forth and so on? What we can do easily is, I think, to send an email out with the questions on them to all of you that came and let you respond directly back to us. We'd be glad to do that. That's not a problem. Yes, sir.
What are some of the advertising of what things we're going to do to get folks to take the survey?
It's interesting. First of all, I would challenge each of you to be certain that all of the organizations that you belong to, your employees, your friends, your church, whatever it may be, please let them know that it's available. We're going to try and make sure through all the media outlets that the Chamber and the Development Authority and the city and county have, that we let as many people know about it as humanly possible. So I know that Virginia, that they're working on different ways to make sure it's out there. I don't know, Virginia, if you want to add anything to that, or anybody else would?
I think you covered it well. The key is just spread FayetteVision.org, and that will take you as a link to the survey.
Other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
I noticed in your statistics you brought it to the national Georgia state level.
Yes.
What did you find in terms of how Fayette County compares the trends with the statistics that you give?
Well, we're not there yet. Renata is deep into the research of how does everything line up, not only with the metro area, the rest of the country, but these other three communities. And one of the things about that is to see how you are doing. What I can tell you from a national level, obviously, is some of the data that I shared with you, which is this has been a very difficult time. We've lost a lot of jobs. We've lost a lot of quality jobs. Some of the replacement jobs have not been as strong as the ones that we've lost. I'm not sure that we're not really yet at a point where we have the data analysis that we'll share with you. That will come as we do the rest of that work, and we'll be back to talk to the steering committee about that in January, and to kind of, it'll then be on the website, so it'll all be there in terms of those comparisons. I think, too, one of the things that's very clear is that it's just been a very real different change, particularly if we were to look back at where Fayette was 10, 15 years ago. It's a very different place, much more mature, much different in terms of what's there. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see where it lands. I don't know exactly where it will just yet. Anything else? Let me say a couple of things as we try to spend a bit of time kind of getting you ready and involved going forward. First of all, it's important to remember that this work is going to produce an action agenda, a serious strategy that's a living document. It's not going to be put on the shelf. It is a document which is going to be, as Jonathan said, on day one, when it is complete and worked through and vetted, and the real work begins this next summer, it's important to remember that even then, it will continue to be living. We'll have very specific guidelines about what's going to happen in the first few months, the first year, and then into years 2 to 5. But it's important, too, to remember that it will change, as all good strategies do. And in fact, we have many of our clients that we end up coming back after 2 years or whatever it may be to do them help them with a mid-course correction. So I don't want you to think that it's going to be static or sitting there. And there will be, as we pointed out earlier, plenty of partners, plenty of involvement, not just with the Chamber and Development Authority, the city and county, but lots of different players. Let me tell you that over my career, I've had the pleasure of having staffs from 3 to 350. I have asked those staffs never to say two things to me, and here they are. And here's the second one. Well, maybe we can get it right this time. The fact is that what I'm going to ask you to do is to not use either one of those terms going forward. One of the things that we're going to provide as we get to the point of seeing and thinking about what you all want in this strategy, in this visioning plan, we're going to provide best practices from all over the world. We do this work every day. We have a register, if you will, of people in every place you can imagine working on different issues and strategies. We're going to share those with the steering committee. They'll be part of some of the documentation. So it will be about trying to find the best way to go forward, and at the same time knowing that the way Fayette may do it may be different from anyone else. So it's to learn from but not to copy, and thinking again that many of these people are doing things again and again to get them right. We have a lot to thank Albert Einstein for, all of the things that he did in terms of inventions and everything else. One of the things that's not as well known is that he is also famous for some one-liners. And I want to share 3 of my favorites with you. Here's the first one. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Everything we got, we did. Everything that's here is part of decisions that were made in Fayette over these years. So let's think anew. Let's think differently. The second one I want to share is probably my favorite definition of insanity. If we keep doing the same thing over and over, we will get the same results. It's a different time. I've tried to explain clearly that the economy will never be what it was. So if we're talking about quality community development and quality economic development, we're going to have to do things differently because it's a different time. One of the others that he used so many times is this one. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. That is what you've chosen to do, to keep this county moving, to keep it steadily going forward, not to fall off, not to stop, but no matter how difficult or steep the grade, to keep moving ahead. That's an important step. It's vital that you continue this work, that you continue to work on it, and that we continue to see the progress that's been made. About 10 years ago, Rosabeth Moss Kanter at Harvard wrote a fascinating book called World Class. She talked about quality communities, world-class communities and world-class companies. And something that she said in that book has stuck with me all of this time. It is about this. Change is debilitating when done to us, but exhilarating when done by us. That is what you're all about. Yes, the economy, the community, the state, the region are all going to change. The question is, who's in charge of that change? We believe, and we have seen, communities continue to control their own destiny, to create their own way, to do it their way, and successfully continue to transform themselves. That's the real challenge for you. That's the opportunity for Fayette. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
First of all, I'd like to thank our our consulting partner here, Mac, and his team. They've been just a joy to work with, and I think you'll agree with me. They're the absolute right selection to go forward with. So, Mac, thanks to you and everybody on the team that have already started working with us, and also with everybody out in the audience here, our community leadership group. You've taken time out of the middle of a Monday, kind of a miserable one. You've got other things to do. But as you saw in that slide when it said, what is the greatest asset, how many people put up there are citizens, are engaged citizens, people that are interested. Sometimes I see people that have been on different sides of issues here on how to become a better county, but everybody was interested in being a better county. And I thank you for that, and I count on your participation going forward. Also appreciate some of our sponsors that have already stepped forward. NCR has generously donated a lot of space for our interviews and our focus group sessions. We'll also be using space provided by the Fayette County Library, it's a Senior Services Center, Dolce here, and also to express our appreciation to our local newspapers who have been very generous in providing space for us to communicate with you and to the citizens of Fayette County what this whole process is about, how we're going to accomplish it, and most importantly, how we need their participation through tools like this, as well as the online survey. I'd remind you once again, please put on your calendars March the 4th for the next community leadership meeting. And Randy, are you in the room? Randy or Michael Burnett? Let me just turn it over to Randy for a minute for a couple of closing comments.
It's the first time I've ever had to drop that down. You're a tall man, Bob. We've spoken to you in the past about the need for funding around this effort. And I want to kind of let you know where we are. First of all, we want to thank, and I want to kind of publicly thank Coweta Fayette EMC, because they have stepped up. They are the reason we were able to start this process. Of the $60,000 we've raised, most of it came from them. So their board and their company stepped up in a big way, which has allowed us to get going and really to get us going into the second week or so in January. We are in the process of having discussions with all the municipalities and the county and the Board of Ed, and those, as you know, those processes take a little longer. We are also in the process of reaching out to businesses in our community. I would say to you, I don't know if Michael's still here. Yeah, Michael Burnett and I. Michael's the incoming chairman of the board of the chamber and chief operating officer out at the hospital, and I'm the outgoing. The two of us are going to continue to be involved in that effort of raising money to keep us moving. It's very important that we keep moving through the process so we can get to May, we can get results, and then we can sit down and really take a plan and then work towards implementation, which is a whole nother discussion that will need to be taking place at that point. So please see one of us, or Bob or Trey, or Virginia, if you have any other questions about that, okay?